So now they want to push him out. Here's the problem. The replacement, Joe Biden is the figurehead of a left-wing government, shadow government, but his replacement is actually a real-life, verified left-winger, whose policies are if I had a list on me today, maybe I have a list on me today, of all the crazy, well, yeah, I only have the one-page list. This list actually goes much longer. Of all the crazy left-wing policies that they want for our country, she supported every single one of them.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about cackling Kamala Harris, who may or may not come under the spotlight soon as Joe Biden continues to deteriorate and the Democrats continue to revolt against Joe Biden and his mental deterioration that they believe could cost them the election. And the Trump team apparently is aware of this. They're aware of the possibility of Kamala Harris potentially taking over for Joe Biden. And this is something that Trump has spoke about in regards to the possibility of Kamala taking over for Joe Biden.
What do you make of all the talk that if Biden steps aside or is pushed out, that it would be Vice President Harris? Do you expect that much would change?
Well, I think that it will be her. I think they are very concerned about the vote if it's not her. They are very, very, they're gun shy. They don't want to do it any other way. I've actually come to believe that's what they're going to do. I think she's an ineffective person. She was in charge of the border. She's never been there. She didn't do a good job, and she hasn't done a job on a lot of things. But it would seem to me that from a political standpoint, that's who they're going with. They're not even talking about alternatives.
Yeah, so wisely, the Trump campaign is considering the possibility of Kamala Harris taking over for Joe Biden, which could still happen despite Joe Biden's defiance. We really don't know. However, again, it is wise to prepare for the possibility of having to face somebody else other than Joe Biden going into this general election season. And this is why the Trump campaign has ratcheted up the attacks against Kamala Harris. In fact, Trump danced off stage at the rally after essentially attacking Kamala Harris throughout the rally.
Kate, if there was a sign that President Trump is loving all this, this is it. Former President Trump danced off the stage last night in Miami after launching several new attacks against Biden and the chaos he says is dividing Democrats right now. CNN's Elena Treen has more on this. Elena, this was, I think, Trump's first post-debate rally. And while Biden's name was really not brought up a lot, you note this morning that for the first time this election cycle, he really dug into Vice President Kamala Harris. Tell us what you heard.
That's right, Sarah. And I found that to be one of the most interesting parts of his rally last night. And you're exactly right. This was his first rally, but also public event since the debate. And what's notable about his attacks on Harris is both Donald Trump and his team have really avoided going after the vice president throughout their campaign. But last night, that was not the case. And I think it just very clearly shows how closely Donald Trump and his campaign are monitoring the situation around Joe Biden and questions over whether he will step aside and if Kamala Harris could potentially be his successor. Take a listen to exactly what Donald Trump said.
But whatever else can be said about crooked Joe Biden, you have to give him credit for one brilliant decision, probably the smartest decision he's ever made. He picked Kamala Harris as his vice president. No, it was brilliant because it was an insurance policy, maybe the best insurance policy I've ever seen, Marco. If Joe had picked someone even halfway competent, they would have bounced him from office years ago. But
now, Sarah, I do want to just share some inside reporting on how Donald Trump and his campaign are thinking about this. One is that despite what he is saying about Kamala Harris not being as strong of an opponent, Donald Trump and his team are very concerned about what it would look like if Joe Biden is not the person at the top of the Democratic ticket. Part of that is because they have spent millions of dollars on modeling and gathering data focused solely on going after Joe Biden. So they really don't know what having someone like Kamala Harris at the top of the Democratic ticket would look like. And so his team is very much delighting in Joe Biden saying repeatedly that he is staying in the race and digging in on remaining as president.
Yeah, so Trump actually brought up a fascinating point that I want to expand on. But first, I want to play this clip of Democrat ghetto Congresswoman Jasmine Crotchet going on CNN and essentially arguing that if you don't want to vote for Joe Biden because of his mental deterioration, then you need to vote for him anyways because Kamala Harris is on the ticket, okay? If you don't want to vote for Joe, then vote for Kamala is essentially the pitch. Take a look.
The problem is that we have colleagues that are scared of their own shadow. Number one, they are not thinking clearly, or they have their own specific motives in why they are not standing by the president. But if Republicans can stand by somebody with 34 felony convictions who incited an insurrection, and then Republicans said, you know what, don't believe your lying eyes, those were just patriots on a tour, then I'm sorry, we can look at what the president was going through, because he was not sitting in a criminal courthouse or chilling at Mar-a-Lago. Instead, he was tired because he had been out in the streets, on the road, taking his message directly to the people. And honestly, I don't think that any presidential campaign runs just on the person at the top of the ticket. You played a clip of the vice president. For everybody that says that they are so in love with the vice president, which I have some questions about some of these people, but nevertheless, she is on the ticket. So if that's who you want to vote for her. Because if anything happens, there is a natural succession plan in the fact that she is the vice president. So if you don't want to vote for Joe, vote for Kamala. She's on the ticket. But at the end of the day, we have to win. It's not Joe and Kamala that are the enemy. It's not them that are the threat. It's this Supreme Court that will become worse. It's also MAGA that has proven themselves to be ineffective and ignore the people.
Yeah, so again, this is an extremely fascinating conversation that I thought about last night. And I really want to expand on this Kamala conversation because, again, the Trump team is fully aware of the possibility of Kamala taking over for Joe Biden. And according to CNN, they are concerned about what that would look like. And if I was the Trump campaign, I would be concerned as well, too, for multiple reasons. Okay, but first, let me take a step back and to say this, right? To address Jasmine Crotchet, the ghetto Congresswoman there, begging her constituents and Democrats to rally around Kamala if they don't like Joe, which again would be to vote for the Biden-Harris ticket. The problem with that is that that's already baked into why Democrats and voters are running away from Joe Biden. Well, the reason why is because nobody believes that Kamala Harris can actually run the country, right? Nobody has faith in Kamala Harris as president of the United States. In fact, the Democrats in their panic over Joe Biden's mental state is actually a direct indictment of Kamala Harris, because what it essentially says is that, we really don't believe that Kamala can beat Trump, number one. Two, they don't believe that Kamala can be an effective president. They don't believe that Kamala could take over and actually run the country, right? That's what they're essentially saying without actually saying it. Because, guys, could you imagine if Gavin Newsom was the VP? Do you think that Democrats would be freaking out right now? I don't think so, actually. I really don't. I think that they would be saying, okay, well, if you don't want to vote for Joe, that's fine, but Gavin Newsom is there. If anything happens to Joe, if Joe can't serve, hey, Gavin Newsom takes over and it is what it is. And hell, they probably would have already overthrown Joe Biden if Gavin Newsom was the VP. But because it's Kamala and they clearly don't have faith in her, this is why there's so much panic, right? Because you would think that the strategy from the Democrats would be, okay, well, we know that Joe is mentally deteriorating. Let's actually just have Kamala go out and do more interviews. Okay, let's have her go on all the mainstream liberal media outlets. Let's have all the mainstream liberal media outlets air her speeches. Let's actually just have her low-key just take over for Joe Biden. That way you can create the perception that a vote for Biden is not actually really a vote for Biden. You're actually voting for Kamala Harris, right? Kamala Harris is actually the one that is running the country. However, Democrats aren't doing that. Why aren't they doing that? Well, the reason why they're not doing that is because they don't have faith in Kamala, which is exactly what Trump was alluding to in his rally speech about Kamala, where he said that, yeah, Kamala was the best insurance policy for Joe Biden because she's so incompetent that Democrats don't even feel comfortable replacing Joe Biden with Kamala. And he's exactly right. He's 100% right. And it's not because Democrats don't want to replace Joe Biden. They can't replace Joe Biden. This is why they're all rallying behind him, because they're like, well, Kamala's so bad that we'd just rather stick with Biden, which again is a damning indictment against Kamala Harris. Which, by the way, I also want to note, it doesn't seem like Kamala Harris actually wants to be president, right? She's not really stepping up and saying, no, let me take over for Joe. Let me do all these interviews and answer the questions so that people understand that, listen, don't worry about Joe. I'm running things, right? She doesn't seem to want the job, right? Because if I'm Kamala, this is the perfect opportunity if you want to be president, hey, to stage a coup against Joe Biden, right? To take over and say, hey, no, I'm running stuff. A vote for Biden is a vote for me. You're not really voting for Biden, so don't worry about him. You're voting for me. Because, I mean, let's be honest. If Biden wins, which would be a miracle for the Democrats, he's not going to be able to serve for 4 years. Okay, Kamala's definitely going to take over at some point. But it seems to me that she doesn't want it, which is hilarious because Kamala was put in her place as VP because of everything that had nothing to do with her actual qualifications. She was a DEI pick, and this is a DEI backfire. She was picked because she's a half black, half Indian woman, and that ultimately is backfiring on Democrats because they can't rely on her as a competent politician or an executive to actually take over for Joe Biden because she wasn't picked for those reasons, right? She wasn't picked for that. Which again, ultimately is biting Democrats in the butt because they can't rely on her to take over for Joe Biden. Because that's what I would do if I'm the Democrats and I'm a part of the elite. If I'm calling the shots, I'm saying, no, we got to run Kamala Harris. Because that is the only way, in my opinion, for them to actually turn this around. It has to be through Kamala Harris, but she's not capable of doing it because she wasn't picked for the right reasons, okay? It's pretty funny to think about. Now, in the case of Kamala Harris actually taking over for Joe Biden, that presents a very fascinating situation for Trump, especially when it comes to the VP pick. Because I can already tell you guys right now, if it's Trump versus Kamala, Trump is going to have a significant disadvantage when it comes to being able to attack Kamala the same way that he could attack somebody like a Joe Biden. Well, why is that? It's because Kamala is a so-called woman of color, and every attack that Trump launches against Kamala will be seen as racist and sexist by the media. They will be screaming about that. They will make the election about the white man attacking a black woman. That's what they will make it about. And I'm not saying that that will work in regards to Kamala actually winning against Trump. I'm just saying it is a tactic that will be used in order to deflect any type of criticism of Kamala Harris. Well, you're criticizing her, you're attacking her, you must be racist and sexist. This is what they'll be screaming about.
What really ticks me off about him, though, is this laughing Kamala remark. It's such a sexist remark because a guy I was with over the weekend, a friend of mine, they said Kamala's laugh annoys me. Remember they said that about Hillary's laugh, that she was cackling. And men, you know, they don't like a funny woman. They're afraid if you laugh or you make a joke that maybe you'll do that when they're in bed with you. It's like this fear of women's laughing and comedy. Yes.
That's very good psychotherapy.
And what was that reference to the Washington Monument? Well, looks very much like a penis to me.
You're on fire today.
Just saying.
I think it's interesting that you say that. Let's face it, the reason he brings up Kamala, the vice president, is because he's afraid of her. Because he knows what a strong candidate she is.
He always says you smell fear when he comes up with a name for somebody.
He understands how her popularity rating is going up. He understands how her approval rating is going up. And he understands that as part of the Biden-Harris team, that is going to be very difficult for him.
And again, I think this is why Trump's VP pick now becomes a very, very, very fascinating choice, because if he goes with a Doug Burgum or a J.D. Vance, which, by the way, I don't care about two white guys being on the ticket. Me personally, I don't care. I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, Trump can't have two white guys. I'm like, no, why can't Trump have two white guys, right? What's wrong with having two white guys on the ticket, right? There's nothing wrong with that. However, again, in the situation of Kamala being the candidate for the Democrats, it becomes, again, a little bit iffy in the sense that having two white guys attack Kamala, the optics of that just plays into the hands of the Democrats and the mainstream liberal media, right? So if that is what the Trump campaign is thinking about, and I'm not saying that this is what they should consider the most, I'm just saying it's something that definitely should be thought about, right? You should think through it, which is, okay, having a VP that can attack Kamala is now something that probably should be heavily considered. I'm not saying it should be the top priority. The top priority is having a VP that can take over for you if something happens. Again, this is the situation that Democrats are in. They don't have a VP that can take over for Joe Biden, which is why they're stuck with Joe Biden, right? So again, the number one priority always has to be, okay, can this person take over and run the country and to promote the agenda, right? That always has to be the number one priority. However, I'm just saying that being able to effectively attack Kamala now becomes something that should be prioritized. Okay, I'm not saying it should be the number one thing when you're talking about a VP pick. And if that now becomes the criteria, if that's the way you're thinking about it, then in my opinion, I personally think that Tulsi Gabbard would perfectly fit the bill, okay, as the VP if Kamala Harris is at the top of the Democrat Party ticket. Well, why do I say that? Well, the reason why I say that is for two reasons. First and foremost, she expands the base. Now, I don't agree with Tulsi and all of her policies, and I do not think that Tulsi is somebody that can carry MAGA into the future, right? However, I'm just saying that if your priority is winning, okay, and expanding the base, then she probably will be the perfect candidate at this point. Again, I'm not saying that she should be the candidate. I'm just saying based off your priorities, then, hey, in this situation, maybe she would be the best VP candidate. Again, if you're thinking about winning and you're thinking about expanding the base. Because Tulsi Gabbard single-handedly ended Kamala Harris's Democrat primary in 2019/2020. And Tulsi Gabbard would be able to effectively attack Kamala Harris without the conversation being deflected to racism and bigotry and sexism, right? Because that's what's going to happen. If Trump starts to really attack Kamala, okay, if he starts to come up with all these names for Kamala and all this other stuff that he typically does for his opponents, again, it's going to be about racism and sexism. It'll be like 2016 when Trump was facing Hillary. Now, again, Trump won, which is good, but I'm just saying that, you know, Kamala having that extra infinity stone of wokeness in a much more woke time period, again, I'm just saying, is something that, again, should be considered. But Tulsi would be the perfect pick if Kamala actually took over. And again, I'm not saying that Tulsi is the best candidate in the sense of being somebody that can take over for MAGA and to lead the conservative movement. No, I don't believe that. But again, it just depends on what your criteria is. If your criteria is, well, we need somebody that can take over, that can actually lead MAGA into the future, then in my opinion, I think the best choice is Vivek. But I don't think that Vivek will be the best choice for actually winning the election, okay? And I'm not saying that Trump can't win with Vivek as VP. I'm just saying that people have to really consider what is your main priority when it comes to a VP pick. Sometimes the VP is picked to help you win elections. Sometimes the VP is picked as a successor to the current guy, right? So again, it just depends on what you're prioritizing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you don't win, then your VP pick doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter if they're your natural successor or if they're going to lead the movement into the future because you didn't win, right? So there's nothing really to lead because you're not winning. I'm not saying that it is absolutely necessary that Trump pick a VP that can effectively attack Kamala, but I'm just saying it's something that if I was him, I would consider that because it becomes a much more important factor if Kamala takes over. In fact, if Trump picked, for example, a Tulsi Gabbard, okay, in response to Kamala Harris taking over or this possibility of Kamala Harris taking over, I would go as far as to propose a debate with the presidential and VP candidates on stage at the same time, right? That way, I would just let Tulsi go off on Kamala and just destroy her, which again, I think would be an incredibly effective tactic. So, you know, I'm not saying that it's absolutely necessary, but I'm just saying that it becomes more important. It's something to consider if Kamala actually takes over. The VP pick becomes much more important in the sense that the dynamics of the race changes in regards to how you can attack your opponent. And that is something I think the Trump campaign should consider. However, I think that Trump can win regardless. Even if he picks a white guy, if he picks a Doug Burgum or a J.D. Vance, doesn't matter. I still think that he can beat Kamala. But, you know, it's really about, okay, what gives you the best chance of winning if winning is the main priority? Okay, because if he picks a Doug Burgum with the current state of the Democrat Party ticket, which is Joe Biden being at the top, then you already know that Trump's not thinking about, well, who's the best candidate to take over for the movement, because he wouldn't be the best candidate. The best candidate would be Vivek. So if he's already thinking along the lines of who's going to help me win, which again, that would be why Doug Burgum would be picked, because he would help Trump in states like a Wisconsin or a Pennsylvania or a Michigan. Okay. If that's your line of thinking, then that kind of changes if Kamala becomes the Democrat nominee, right? So now, again, it seems to me that you would have to look at somebody like a Tulsi or somebody else being the best pick, again, if your priority is winning. So I don't know. I'm just saying that these are things that I will be thinking about. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.